The Something You Should Know podcast today is sponsored by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/SYSK. You can choose one of over thousands and thousands of titles, including the books discussed on today's podcast. Go to audibletrial.com/SYSK for your free audiobook and 30-day free trial. audibletrial.com/SYSK. Today on Something You Should Know, a simple negotiating tactic that will help you get what you want at the price you want to pay. Plus, how to adopt the attitude of success. It's partly due to not being afraid to try.
You know, I think Churchill said, success is never final and failure is seldom fatal. It's courage that counts. We're not in situations day to day where failure is going to kill us. We might drop the ball, but we have the chance to recover. And it's that kind of self-talk that gets us by.
And a lot of parents believe the reason their kids are overweight is because they're not active enough. But it's actually the other way around. And why it's important to like the town and the neighborhood where you live.
It's something called place attachment. That feeling of being at home, feeling like you belong in a place. There are studies that show that people who feel place attached live longer than those who don't.
All this today on Something You Should Know.
Something you should know. Fascinating intel, the world's top experts, and practical advice you can use in your life today. The Something You Should Know podcast with Mike Carruthers.
Hi, welcome to the podcast. I'm Mike Carruthers. Another great episode for you today. I'm sure you'll come away with some fascinating intel that you can use in your life. Now, I have to tell you that having interviewed so many people over the years, both on the radio and for podcasts, I learned early on that there's this whole category of people who are success experts, motivational speakers, and the type of people they can get you all excited about your life and your potential. But when you look close, there really isn't a whole lot to their message. It's mostly just rah-rah, go for it, be your authentic self, what you can conceive, you can achieve, that kind of thing. I've been pitched so many of these types of guests over the years that someone who used to work with me years ago came up with a whole category for them that we've ever since then called the you can do it, sure you can kind of guest, because that's primarily what their message is rah-rah, go, you can do it, sure you can. So I'm very hesitant to interview those people because it's mostly sizzle. There's not a lot of steak. But today I'll be talking to Alan Weiss. And I say all this because he might seem at first to be one of those guys, but I think you'll find he really does have an important message. And he'll discuss your success and your potential and how to maximize it in a way you probably haven't heard before. Also, the idea that kids today are fat because they're just sitting around all day playing video games and don't get any exercise, that's a pretty widely held belief, that the reason kids are fat is they're sedentary, they don't move. But some very conclusive research over years now shows that that just isn't true. If you have kids, I think you're going to find this eye-opening. That's coming up. Plus, the importance of loving where you live, why it's important, and how to change your attitude about the town in which you live if you don't like it. And first up today, a little negotiating tactic that anyone can use that will help you get the item you want at the price you want to pay. Now, it's pretty common when you go to, say, a flea market or a yard sale, garage sale, and you say to the seller, I'll give you $20 for that. Usually a nice round number, like $20. And that may not be the best strategy. A better way to go would be to say, I'll give you $19 for that, or $21 for that. See, there was a study where participants had to negotiate a sale that started with one of three first offer conditions. Some people received a $20 offer from buyers, others received a $19 offer, and the third group were given a $21 starting figure. And the results were that the sellers made more assertive counteroffers when they received a $20 asking price than when they were given more precise numbers like $19 or I'll give you $21 for that. The findings suggest that when you offer a price that doesn't end in zero, that isn't a big round number, it signals that maybe you're knowledgeable about this item and its market value, or you wouldn't have picked such a precise number. So the seller is more likely to trust your judgment and accept the offer. But you need to be prepared to back up that number if the seller asks. And that's something you should know. If you've ever thought about being an entrepreneur or being successful at whatever you put your mind to, you're going to enjoy my next guest. Alan Weiss has authored over 60 books. His most recent one is called Million Dollar Maverick. He has a worldwide coaching and consulting business, and he has a message about success that, well, I find it both inspiring and different than a lot of the other success advice you hear. Welcome, Alan.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
So let's start with your premise. What's your message, and how is it different than all the other success gurus?
The premise is that if you want to succeed greatly in life, and that's not strictly related to income, it's just to be happy, you can't do it as part of a herd. You can't do it as part of a school of fish. And so if you're going to be a maverick and stand out alone, you might as well look good while you're standing there. And I've been asked to record how I've done this over the years, and I've written 64 books in 12 languages, and this was my favorite to write.
Wow, 64 books.
Well, I go for volume and not accuracy, so it's not so hard.
Well, sure, anybody could do that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how did you do it? I mean, what is your obviously it took 64 books to explain it, but can you condense it down? I mean, what's the philosophy?
Well, I did condense it down in Maverick, and the philosophy is this: you can't be concerned overly with pleasing everybody else. You can't go around seeking affection every place so that everyone likes you. What you should be seeking is respect. If you want unconditional love, get a dog, have a solid relationship, have a partner. But the fact of the matter is that we live in a world where everybody is starting to march to the beat of the exact same drummer. And even the admonition, march to the beat of a different drummer, I don't like. I think you should create your own music. In fact, I think if you don't blow your own horn, there is no music. And so the question becomes one of what kind of self-esteem do you have? What kind of belief in yourself do you have? So that you can set yourself apart. I truly believe, Mike, that people get up in the morning in one of two dispositions. They get up in the morning saying, what a great day this is. What a fabulous day, another day of opportunity. Or they get up saying, oh, geez, another slow crawl through enemy territory, And every day, I take my dogs out to the backyard, and they go crazy every morning. It's the same yard, but they say, my God, the yard. Look at this, the yard's here. And they find things to do. And I think people need that attitude. My dogs, when they see an open gate, they don't stop and do a risk analysis. They don't stop and say, geez, I wonder if he'll be upset. They run through the gate and see what happens.
So how do you do that, though? Because, it's one thing to say, rah, rah, you can do it, sure you can, let's go, let's go. It's another thing to actually do it because I've got these problems, and it's great for you to be a great cheerleader and tell people to do this, but sometimes it's tough.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I don't believe in positive affirmations, right? I don't believe in telling yourself you're your own best friend and all of this. But I do believe in two or three things, and they look like this. Number one is you have to build your skill set. And so there are things you have to get efficacious at doing that relate to your love and your passion and your career. I mean, a true career is what you love doing and are great at. And so you need to build your skills so you get better and better. You need to develop yourself and never be content. The second thing is you have to master language. Every business today is a communications business. And we have to master language and its nuances so we can exert influence, so we can help people follow our path. There's a great movement today about presence, and presence is nothing more than people recognizing you're someone that they want to follow. And that comes from building skills and building language. And then the third thing is building your own language. And by that I mean positive self-talk. This field of positive psychology is very interesting to me. Positive self-talk, you can identify this every day. I coach people every single day. I have a global coaching community. And some people start sentences with, I'm struggling with, I can't do this, I've never had success with. Instead of saying, I need help with, I have a challenge here, I'm going to do this. And the way we talk to ourselves informs our behavior. So these aren't mindless affirmations. The actual words we use inform how we act, and that makes a huge difference.
Yeah. Well, the self-talk thing I get. Talk about, though, first of all, the language. When you say master the language, I mean, what do you mean?
I mean that most people are trying hard to tell people things instead of ask them things. If you look at great salespeople, for example, which I've had the luxury of doing, they don't tell people so much. They ask people the right questions. If you don't ask the right questions, you don't get the right answers. And so you have to be able to know what to ask, and then almost like an attorney who's told, never ask a question to which you don't know the answer, a variation is you have to be able to deal with whatever answer you get. And so if somebody says to me, Alan, look, I've heard you're an excellent consultant, but we've never hired a consultant in the history of this company, and I don't intend to start now, my reaction is you'd be surprised at how many of my best clients started the conversation the same way. So what I've done there is I've reframed the issue from we don't hire consultants and, you're in my frame to what you're saying is said by my best clients and you're going to become one of them. It's those kinds of techniques with language that influence conversations. And so the sequence, Mike, looks like this. Language influences discussion. Discussion influences relationships, and relationships influence business.
I can imagine people listening to you and just the way you talk and the way you clearly carry yourself that, this guy's good. He's got it, but I don't have that thing he's got.
And so what people have to say is, this guy's good and I want it. And the people who join my global communities and the people who read my books and the people who attend my special events and the people who read my stuff online every day, these are people who say, this guy's good and I'm going to have it.
What is it?
It's self-esteem. It's a feeling of confidence. It's a mastery of language. It's the knowledge that you can put things in perspective. My father was a paratrooper in the first regiment ever formed in the United States in 1940. They jumped from 500 feet without a chute. And when Pearl Harbor happened, they shipped him and his unit to Australia. He jumped in New Guinea, to stop the farthest advance of Japanese troops. Half his unit was wiped out. He passed away last December. He was 99 years and 11 months. And people were shooting at him. Nobody's shooting at us. And so if you put things in perspective and you realize that, I think Churchill said, success is never final and failure is seldom fatal. It's courage that counts. We're not in situations day to day where failure is going to kill us. We might drop the ball. We might miss a basket, but we have the chance to recover. And it's that kind of belief and that kind of self-talk that gets us by. Now, I want to stress, I'm not just talking here about rah-rah stuff like, as you said before, is inappropriate, doesn't help. I'm talking about specific sets of skills that can be acquired to make people better immediately.
And give me one or two.
Well, I told you one about language, the kind of language we use. Another is what I call critical thinking skills. So critical thinking skills would be somebody presents an issue to you, and you determine what the distinctions are about it compared to other similar issues. Once you find distinctions, you can find what the cause is. Another example, when most people in organizations have a problem, they try to find blame. Who's at fault? Instead, you should find cause. What caused this to happen, and let's remove the cause. Those simple adjustments, and I call them critical thinking skills, make all the difference in the world. If you're making a decision, don't decide on an alternative before you know what your objective is. In other words, don't decide on the route till you know the destination. This sounds blazingly simple, and it is, but most people don't do it well.
So let's talk about what you started this conversation with, that a lot of people just want to be liked and maybe they should just go get a dog instead. But on the other hand, if you have so much confidence in yourself and so much self-esteem, but perhaps you're wrong about something, you're not open to hearing what other people are listening because you're so sure of yourself that you're right.
What you just said is not true. What you just described is a narcissist. What I said is you need high self-esteem, not excessive self-esteem. When people have high self-esteem, when they feel they have a certain amount of expertise that they can share with others, they are most willing to change their position because they're not threatened by a question. They're not threatened by an opposing view. They take it under consideration. So if I'm very defensive, people who are very defensive are highly insecure, and they try to protect themselves. So they don't expose themselves to questioning, or they shut down questioning, or they argue with people. But people who are very secure readily admit that they're wrong because it improves them. And the secret of high self-esteem, at least one of them, is that you're willing to change when you're shown a better route.
But I've heard that self-esteem is something you earn, not something you make, and that that you have to earn it by accomplishments and doing things. And if you don't feel like you've done much, how do you get it?
I think what's bestowed upon others is a title like expert or thought leader. But you can gain your own self-esteem. In fact, I would make a case, and I make this in Million Dollar Maverick, that you cannot allow yourself to be validated by others. You cannot allow your self-esteem to be validated by external forces and third parties. What you do for yourself is you put yourself in positions that challenge you and that you overcome, or if you don't overcome them, you learn from the setback. That's called resilience. And you build self-esteem by building your skills, which I mentioned earlier, and you review what makes you good. You know, we are so prone to choose, pick out, examine what we've done wrong, that we overlook that examination of what we've done right. And only by understanding of what we've done right can we replicate it. And once we can replicate it and it becomes part of our unconscious competency, our esteem grows.
Do you think, though, that part of this is personality, that if you're an introvert, this is tougher because it's hard to get out there and do the things you're talking about?
One of my favorite subjects. You know, there's a plethora of personality tests on the market. And you can be a high D, inverted X, blue, passive-aggressive, subversive, this and that. And I don't believe in any of them. I believe they're all horoscopes, every one of them. All of us have different personalities, and all of us, I start with the premise, are basically healthy. Some people are damaged, borderline personality disorders, but most of us are healthy. And consequently, we have different personalities, but all of us, every one of us is capable of learning and improving. We learn at different speeds. We learn in different modes given our personalities. But it's not a question of a perfect personality, just like there's no such thing as a perfect leadership style. You know, I've consulted with perhaps 200 of the Fortune 500 companies over my career. And one thing I've learned is there's no perfect leadership style. The best leadership style is one that's flexible and adjusts to the circumstances.
So do you think that someone like you is, and who has been very successful as a consultant and clearly as an author, is because you're just so goddamn smart, or because you have that confidence and resilience and self-esteem that you talk about, and that's what really drives your success?
Yes. Those two things are interchangeable. Those two things are self-reinforcing. People can build their smarts. It's not something that's God-given and is in your DNA. Anyone can build their smarts, and anyone can build their confidence, and they reinforce each other. And so you build both your sense of self-worth and you build your competencies. And once you do that, they reinforce each other, and it's an extremely powerful position. And almost anybody can achieve it if they do get out of the herd and do get out of that school of fish.
So how does someone like you or the people you coach, how do you take rejection and failure? What do you do with it?
Well, I do several things with it. The first is I do not generalize it. And so let's say I'm trying to sell something to you and you say, no, Alan, thanks, I don't want it, don't need it. I walk out and I don't say I'm a lousy salesperson. I don't say I'm a lousy marketer. I say, at this date, at this time, Mike decided not to buy. And I move on to the next potential sale. And so I don't generalize a failure, but I do generalize a victory. And so when somebody does buy, I don't say, oh, Mike bought, that's great. I say, I'm a really good marketer. And in fact, just to digress for 30 seconds, this is a great technique with your kids. If your kid makes a great play on the field, you don't say, that was a great kick. You say, you're a hell of an athlete. That builds character much more than a specific example. Now, going back to your question, another thing I don't do is I never let a defeat or a failure get me down. I treat that as I treat them as learning experiences, just like I treat victory as learning experiences. And if your mindset is you treat everything as a learning experience, as progress, then you don't feel that you've been pushed backwards. You feel you continue going forwards. And the final thing is I don't put my ego out there in the bow of the ship. One of the things it says in Maverick, and one of the most, consistently quoted passages in Maverick is my statement that really excellent people are ego-less. And by that I mean you don't put your ego in the bow of the ship and let it get battered by the waves and the storms and the winds. You tuck it away. And you don't take things as a personal commentary on you. Now, that extends from, people drive up the highway, somebody cuts them off, and they go crazy. They feel it's a personal attack on them just because a driver made a stupid move. It's not a personal attack on them, and we take things too darn personally. And so if you refuse to do those kinds of things, then a setback simply becomes another step in life where you learn and you become resilient. And what everybody needs today, what every maverick needs, is resilience.
Great. Thanks. Alan Weiss is the author of the book Million Dollar Maverick. The book's available, it's available everywhere, but there is a link to the book at Amazon.com on the show notes page for this podcast episode on our website, somethingyoushouldknow.net. Thanks for joining me, Alan.
My pleasure, Mike. Thanks for the good questions.
Let me talk for a moment about our sponsor today on the Something You Should Know podcast, and that is Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/SYSK, which stands for Something You Should Know. Now, you just heard Alan Weiss, his book, Million Dollar Maverick, and at least one or two of his other books are available at audible.com, and that could be the one you choose to get for free. Just go to audibletrial.com/SYSK and select Alan's book, or any one of the other bazillions of titles that audible.com has. And then you can listen to the book on your iPhone, your Android, your Kindle, your MP3 player. It's really great if you've not really gotten into the audiobook thing. It is such a cool way to consume a book. And you can get a free download of a book and try it out for free at audibletrial.com/SYSK. audibletrial.com/SYSK. Well, we've all got to live somewhere. And so the hope is that we like wherever it is we live. But clearly, some people don't like where they live. They'd rather be someplace else. But as you might imagine, liking where you live sure makes life easier and more enjoyable. And this idea of liking where you live is a topic that has been researched by Melody Warnick, and the results of that research are in her book titled This Is Where You Belong, The Art and Science of Loving the Place You Live. Welcome, Melody.
Thank you so much for having me.
So why don't some people like where they live? Well, let's start with how many of us don't like where we live.
The average American moves 11.7 times in their lifetime, which is kind of a bizarrely high number. And every year, 12% of Americans move. That's about 36 million people in the country picking up stakes and moving to another place, at least another house, but often mega moves of 500 miles or more. Every time we do that, we're kind of restarting the clock on all the social connections we've created in the place we live, the neighbors we know, the volunteer activities we've gotten involved in, and we start over from scratch in the new place, knowing nothing and no one. And it turns out that it is important to feel like you're connected in the town you live in. It's something called place attachment. And place attachment is that feeling of being at home, feeling like you belong in a place, feeling like it's the place you want to be. There are studies that show that people who feel place attached, they enjoy the place they live, they know people, live longer than those who don't. And it can actually be really good for our physical health and our well-being. So it's something a lot of us don't think about. We kind of get a job and go where the job takes us, but we really need to spend a little more time thinking about how to make our places we want to be instead of just places we sleep at night.
So this idea that people move that many times in a lifetime, I am assuming that is larger than it used to be, and that people are moving more than they used to. And why is that? Are we just restless, or is it typically employment? Why are people moving so much?
Americans actually, that number, as high as it is, doesn't necessarily indicate that Americans are moving more than they used to. I think American mobility has been high, at least for the past 50 years since we've kept statistics on it. But I think it is a long-standing cultural tradition in the country. You look at our country's roots, we are a nation of immigrants and of explorers and pioneers. And I think there is a feeling among Americans that we need to move west, or, if not west, move somewhere. So I think that we are a restless people. And I know for me personally, that there's always a sense that I just needed to find the next place, that the next town would be the right town for me. It would feel comfortable instantly. It would magically solve all my problems. And so I kind of kept moving, and, my husband and I kept looking for the next place, the next job. I think a lot of Americans do that, and there's something to be said for learning how to be content where you are.
I wonder if anyone's looked at this, if the places people choose to move is typically based on what? It's someplace I've always wanted to go. It's a place I've visited in the past and thought it would be cool to live there. What makes people pick that spot?
That's a really good question. So census figures they ask why people move, and the number 1, 2, and 3 reasons are maybe what you would expect. First and foremost, people move for jobs. They also move for family reasons, which could potentially be anything from I want to get closer to my aging parents to I need to move to the good school district because my kid's about to start kindergarten. But there's also definitely other reasons that people move that the census doesn't measure. In a recent study, it was found that millennials are more likely than any of their forebears to first pick the city they want to live in and then find a job to take them there. So as opposed to just, getting a job and allowing yourself to be moved anywhere that the job takes you, millennials want to have more control over the place they live. And I think that comes out in the way people choose places in a lot of different ways. Sometimes you want to be closer to the ocean because that kind of environment really speaks to you, or you really want to live in a big city, or you want to live in a small town. The way we choose where we live can feel really personal and intimate, almost as inexplicable as why you like the music you do or the books. It just is a part of who you are. I've talked to people in the research for this book who have, had the freedom to move somewhere and have made huge spreadsheets of factors that matter to them. One man I met made a spreadsheet that included things like the number of vegan restaurants in the town and the prevalence of Lyme disease. I talked to a woman who decided that she and her husband wanted to change. They were living in Washington, D.C., and they wanted to try something else. And they bought an RV and traveled around the country and visited all the continental United States. And from that experience, based on the places they went and the places they liked, they ended up settling in Portland, Maine. So people are becoming, I think, more than ever conscious of the role that place plays in our happiness, and they want to have more control over that. They want to end up in a place that will help them be happy.
And generally speaking, do people, once they've moved, like that they've moved, not like that they've moved? It's not what I thought it would be. This is great. I'm so glad I'm here, and I'm ready to dive in and become part of the community. What is there a typical experience?
Well, there's one study that shows that about half of Americans want to move. So that suggests that not everyone is happy where they live. I know for movers, there may not be a typical experience. A lot of movers move and feel connected to the place they live, and others struggle. I think struggle is common because every time you move, it's a lonely and chaotic process. So I found that there are some commonalities among people who seem to settle into their place quicker, to be happier there, to be more connected. And that's what the book is about that process of learning to feel happy. And if you're already relatively happy in your town, it's about learning to be even more engaged and to sort of dive deeper where you live.
And so what does that process look like in a nutshell?
So I outlined 10 steps, and these are things that both research has shown correlate with place attachment, behaviors that make people feel more attached to where they live, and also behaviors that help the place you live become more satisfying and more rewarding to live in. So it starts with walking and biking. This is something that a lot of people long for. Recently, there's been a shift from people who want to live in the car-centric suburbs to people who want to live in walkable downtown districts. They want to be able to get to the stores and restaurants on foot. Even if you don't live in a walkable neighborhood, walking and biking where you live helps you see it from a slower, more human perspective that allows you to notice details and things that increase place attachment. But after walking and biking, there's buying local, connecting with your neighbors, doing fun things in your town, doing the things that your town is good at or the things you might take visitors to do, getting out in nature, volunteering, eating local food, getting involved in the political process, creating something new in your community and staying loyal to it despite challenges and problems. Part of place attachment is understanding that your town isn't perfect. No town is. But you like it anyway, and you want to be involved in making it better.
I would imagine, though, that this has to start with the right attitude, because if you wake up every morning thinking, "God, I hate this place," it's going to be hard to. It's going to be hard to do what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of what I learned is that learning to love your town is almost like an extended exercise in positive thinking. One of my big takeaways was that if you want to love your town, you act like someone who loves your town would act. So it's kind of like the idea that if you behave in a certain way, the emotion will follow. If you smile big enough, eventually you'll feel happy. So it definitely starts with that desire to feel more connected with where you are, and you kind of just keep doing the things that should hopefully make you feel better about your place. Certainly there's an idea of person-environment fit. Not every town is going to work for every person, and you see that in most towns and cities. There are people who are really passionate about, say, Nashville, and there are people who hate it and can't wait to move. And, towns and cities can be really polarizing like that. So if you're on that side of someone who's like, ugh, I hate living here, I can't wait to move away, you have two choices. You can either go ahead and move away, which is fine, maybe find a place that works better for you. But not everyone has that freedom. And if you're in a place that for whatever reason you need to make work for you right now, there are things that I think can change that for you. Behaviors that you can engage in that will help you see your town in a new way and even lead you to get involved in changing some of the things you really hate about it. Like if you live in a small town, you can't stand that there's nothing to do there on the weekends, don't just put up with that. Get involved in the process to, build a new museum or start, a festival or something like that.
One interesting thing I found when I moved from a small town in Connecticut I came to California, Southern California, to go to college, L.A., and I was struck and still remember being struck with the idea that there was this in the media that there was this promotion of the Southern California lifestyle. Like you kept getting reminded how wonderful it was to be here, which I never saw in Connecticut. And I think more, chambers of commerce have maybe gotten on board where communities actually almost brainwash their citizens into telling them how great it is to be here. Yeah,
definitely. There are people whose whole job is doing place marketing for towns and cities, and in fact, for the book, I went with one of these groups to a little town in Arizona called Sierra Vista, and the town needed to change their residents' perceptions of the town. And so they hired this marketing firm to create, slogans and artwork and things like that. And a lot of towns across the country are doing that, which sounds really crazy. Like you said, it sounds like, we're brainwashing people into believing that this is the place you want to live. But a lot of how we see our towns, how we experience them, is perception. It goes back to the idea of everyone feels differently about the town they live in. Some people love it, some people hate it. And it almost is like none of us are living in the same place. We're all experiencing our towns in slightly different ways.
Right. Well, I think that's really true. I mean, I know I love going to New York City. I think it's a great place to visit, and there's nothing more exciting. I couldn't live there more than I could live on Mars. I would hate it. But there are those people who say, "Oh, I couldn't live anywhere else than in Manhattan," and I think, well, have you tried? I mean, I couldn't imagine that lifestyle. So you're right. Everybody has their own perception of their town, and it's kind of all in your head to some degree.
Right. And so if you can change your perception of your town, your perception of what you're experiencing there, or if your town can help change your perception of it, by making some small tweaks, including, how they market themselves, there's a reason we have ads for companies. It's because they can be effective in changing the way we see something and changing the way we see our place, the place we live, may be really vital. People who are happier where they live, feel satisfied with it, become ambassadors for it. They become the people who talk it up, who invite friends, who think it's a great place to live, and soon other people hear that and they want to go there as well. So it can actually be an incredibly powerful tool for communities. If you can make the people who live there happier, then your town grows.
Lastly, and we've sort of talked around this, but I'd like to know if there's a direct answer to this, and that is, with all this moving around that people are doing, are they generally happy that they made the move, or are they generally unhappy that they made the move?
I don't know that I've seen research on that. My guess is that people are generally happy for a while. Place attachment takes a while to grow. It tends to peak between 3 and 5 years, and after that, it can decline. So there's something really attractive about novelty. Novelty makes people happy, and so sometimes I think there's something exciting about moving to a new place. Discombobulating also, but when you're in a new place, there's just the wonderful idea of starting over. It's this idea of the geography cure that this place is going to make everything better for me. And it can take a few months to realize that may not be true. Your town has its own quirks and weirdnesses, and it may be difficult to get to know people and things like that. And so that's where making the conscious effort to become more attached comes in. Sometimes it's a great fit right from the start and you feel at home and you're so happy about it. But it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you move to a town that you think is going to be great and realize that it takes time to fall in love. It may not be love at first sight. And there are things you can do to to hasten that process. And that's what I did for myself in the town I live in Blacksburg, Virginia. And, a few years later, I'm really happy here. So I can vouch that it works.
Well, it's good to know that if you don't like where you live, maybe all you need to do is try a little harder to like it. And then if you still don't like where you live, you can always move and try to like the new place you live. Thanks, Melody. Melody Warnick is the author of the book, This Is Where You Belong, The Art and Science of Loving the Place You Live. There is a link to her book on the show notes page for this episode of the podcast on our website, somethingyoushouldknow.net. Thanks, Melody.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Childhood obesity. It's a big problem in this country, and it's only getting worse. But this is interesting. The assumption that one of the reasons kids are fat today is that they're not physically active enough. But an interesting study turns that theory on its head. A report from the Early Bird Diabetes Study suggests that physical activity has little, if any, role to play in the obesity epidemic among children. And they studied children over an 11-year period. What they discovered was that inactivity doesn't lead to obesity. Obesity leads to inactivity. What does that mean? Well, it means that it's very difficult for a child to exercise his or her way out of being fat. That being fat makes activity difficult for kids, so that's one of the reasons they just don't do it. Why are kids fat in the first place? Well, the study concluded that the problem is pretty much food, which puts the responsibility on parents to understand that poor food choices are what makes kids fat. You can't feed kids junk and then blame them for being lazy and fat, when the real problem is that they're lazy and fat because they eat junk. And that's something you should know. The podcast today is sponsored by Audible.com. You can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/SYSK. You can download one free audiobook from their thousands and thousands of books to choose from, including both books by my guest today. Go to audibletrial.com/SYSK. SYSK stands for Something You Should Know. That's audibletrial.com/SYSK. I'm Mike Carruthers. Thanks for listening today to Something You Should Know.